So, hey, folks, and welcome to iWizard. I am here today with my favorite booktuber. This is Mike from Mike's Books. Mike is probably the guest I've had on my channel the most, aside from Christopher Rocchio. But today we're going to be talking about the Prince of Nothing series. I think we're going to start out non-spoiler as we kind of talk about the overarching series, and then we're going to get into book three, The Thousandfold Thought, which I have here in the second half of the discussion, and I'll make a spoiler announcement. So welcome, Mike. Glad to have you, man.
Hey man, thank you so much. Anytime you want to talk, just hit me up because a series like this, you definitely need to decompress a little bit, I think, right?
Oh, absolutely, man.
And I
Like
think it's the
I
first time you and I have actually been like reading the same book at the same time, correct? And like
I
finishing
know,
them
but the
at the same
thing is
time.
you blow past me. You'll be like, okay, we're gonna do Gone with the Wind, and you'll be done with with the Wind in 8 days, and it'll take me 3 weeks. And
Oh, that's how I feel with Sun Eater books. Everybody's done before me, so
again,
I
yeah, I
get
guess it
that.
just depends on like what your priors are and what your background is and stuff like that. The philosophy books,
That's
I
the
can
one.
zip through them because even you beat me on this book. But it's funny. Speaking of that, Mike, we were talking on Discord and just talking earlier, and you said, and you've said this several times. You said, "Oh man, I'm like not gonna get all that philosophy stuff that you're gonna catch." And you were on your New Year's live stream, and you were telling Christopher Rocchio that you were going to feel stupid coming on to talk about a philosophical book like this one. And nothing could be further from the truth. You are way smarter than me. I just know about philosophy and intellectual history. That's like my thing, right?
I,
It's
I,
like
I
someone who
I
knows
always
about
say that
NASCAR.
because I remember I was on your channel when God, was it Kingdoms of Death? Chris Verrocchio came out, and you and him were talking about stuff for 20 minutes. Like I have no idea what you are talking about.
But
I
again,
didn't
it's
read.
like
I
NASCAR or
felt like I
college
didn't do the
football.
homework.
There's a lot of stuff I don't know about too. And we just come at things from different angles. And so I wanted to say right off the bat, you're the one we're all trying to keep up with, not the
Oh.
other way around. So you should give yourself more credit and
Well,
stuff
what I
like
said
that.
about this today is I was talking about it on my weekly update and was saying that it's one of those series where I think you can pull a ton of themes and a ton of philosophy out of if you're looking for that. But if you aren't, you can still enjoy the series very much.
Yeah,
And you
it's a
don't
little
have
like
to
what
be a philosophy major to understand the series.
exactly. It's kind of like Avatar:
Got in
Last
for
Airbender or those, those old Disney movies where you can have the kids on the couch with a bowl of popcorn watching it and like enjoying the plot, and then as an adult you can kind of enjoy the fact that you're getting it at a different level.
Hmm.
And I think that's true too of like R. Scott Baker, right? You can know all the philosophy and stuff like same with Christopher Rocchio. And that will enhance your reading experience, but you can also enjoy the kind of pew pew like space battles and kind of the characters and all of that stuff. So, all right. So I wanted to do this because, as you said earlier, I saw that we were basically in the same place in the Prince of Nothing trilogy, and as you said, that's kind of rare for us. I was
Hmm.
actually going to wait till early February to read this, but when I saw that you were about to read Thousandfold Thought, I was like, oh my God, I'm on vacation. I can actually keep up with him. This is the perfect opportunity to do this because everyone else has really blown past me. So let's start with this. I'm calling this episode Why You Should Read the Prince of Nothing trilogy. And so I thought that I would turn the question to you, regardless of what you thought of the last book. We'll get to that. Why should people read this series? What do you like about it? What kinds of readers do you think will enjoy this series?
Well, I usually try to preserve my why you should read videos that I do for books I know will be people pleasers. I definitely don't think this is going to be something for everyone. Without a doubt, this is going to have a very niche audience, I think.
Yeah.
And it's not just because of all the philosophy and stuff that we just talked about, but it has all the trigger warnings. It's like if you're easily upset in the least, you probably won't make it past the prologue. I mean, it's a very, very bleak and disturbing world. And it's one of those that I can see now that when I would talk about, oh, hey, the first law is a good grimdark series, and people are like, LOL. They think it's kind of funny that because it doesn't have that comparison. But it's just, I think it's something where if you are very much interested in kind of the background lore, like you read something like Frank Herbert's Dune, and you can latch on to, okay, it's got all these words I don't know what they mean. It's got all this stuff that clearly stuff that's happened for thousands of years that I don't know about, but you're able to kind of just go with that and get the information that's given to you, and as well as someone who's very clearly read Silmarillion before. I think if you like those two things set against like a backdrop of like real world history of like the Crusades, yeah, this would be something you're probably very much into because this is very much about a holy war, and it has a lot of those things, but it also has a lot of those things that are just gonna make you be like, what is wrong with this man? Why is he writing this stuff, But it's one of those where I just feel like if you're into, it has so many things for different people. If you're into beautiful writing, I mean, he's got that stuff. If you're into a deeper meaning, you want to search for, you want to be like Philip and you want to find a theme on every page, I think you can do that. But if you're also just a fan of, like I said, Lord of the Rings and Dune, but a very, very R-rated version of those two things, I think you can find plenty to like here. But it's definitely not for the weak of heart. I will definitely say that without doubt. That's why I've been telling everyone it is not going to be a people pleaser series. It's there's going to be fans of it for sure, and there are those people who love it. They freaking love it. Just like
Yes.
I thought that first book was incredible. So it has those things I think for just a regular fun fantasy reader, or someone who likes something like Frank Herbert, or got maybe more so of like God Emperor than Dune, I would think a little bit. And I think you'll probably like stuff like this. It has the rich lore and the very funky names like a Lord of the Rings, like the Silmarillion or something like that. But it's got those history that goes back thousands of years that you just want to know more about. I think that yeah, that's the kind of reader that would really really dive into this stuff. But again, if it's not for the weak of heart, I can't say that enough.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you made that it's kind of like in terms of substance, it's almost like the difficulty level or the sort of substance of if you combined God Emperor of Dune with Dune.
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. What I was going to tell you though is, you said it's not for everyone. That is very true. You're right about that. But what's interesting is that the R. Scott Baker fandom, the ardent, hardcore Baker stans, if you talk to them, they're some of the nicest
Oh yeah.
fans in the like fantasy genre online world. Like I'm part of their Facebook group. I've talked to them in all sorts of different forums, Discord, and stuff like that. They are okay with you not liking it, and they're really nice
Yeah.
about it, and they're thoughtful and intellectual, and they have like jobs and like
I
I
agree. Slay, one of my patrons, Slay, who we talked to normal many times, it was one of the reasons you and Philip and Joanna bullied me, and then it's like we had a patrons call, and he was so nice about it. I was like, well, I'm gonna read this now
Yeah,
because yeah,
Slay's a good
they are
guy, man.
super
I
awesome.
I put out that first review of Darkness That Comes Before, and that guy gave me a $50 Amazon gift card
Oh wow.
just randomly, and I can't thank him enough. Really, really nice guy. So I think what drew me to this series was the fact that it was sold as like philosophical grimdark fantasy, which that's like an instant yes for me, and I felt like that didn't exist. So the fact that finally a series comes along where you have a warring sorcerer and sorcerer schools and rival magic systems derived from philosophy. That's what's cool is that the gnosis, the anagogic method, the Suki magic that the Sisharim use, that stuff is all inspired by like metaphysics and logic and semiotics and stuff like that. And if you find that kind of stuff interesting, this is a series that kind of takes philosophy and like transmogrifies it and puts it on the page and makes it interesting and turns it into fantasy. I'll tell you something, this is true. And if anyone tells you otherwise, they are lying to you. This is a truth that you can take to your grave. All philosophy majors, all philosophers want to be sorcerers deep down at the end of the day. They dream of it, or maesters, or what have you. But that's one thing for me. I guess it's also the grimdark setting. This is real grimdark, right? This is gritty. no holds barred, white knuckle sort of battles and violence, and there's no shortage of brutality. It's filled with sick and dastardly characters and morally gray characters. I know that's become a cliche at this point, but
Sure.
beyond that, it's beautiful prose, as you said, the deeper themes that Bakker explores. It's the reflective characters who are thinking about what it means to be human and consciousness and free will. And I just like, Mike, how central those themes I mentioned are to the overarching story. Like he weaves them in pretty well. So that would be my pitch at the end of the day. There's nothing else like this in fantasy. There's really no one else doing what R.
Definitely.
Scott Bakker does and can do. So I guess I would leave it at that.
100%. I think that you will not read any of these three books and ever say, "Hey, this reminds me of this other fantasy."
Right.
Like I said, I have those feelings of it feels like a marriage of Frank Herbert and Tolkien to me, but it never once feels like Lord of the Rings or Dune. I mean, maybe you get like a little bit of Paul Dickhead. I call Kellis Dickhead Paul Atreides a couple times. So I mean, it's clear that Baker is a big fan of Dune. Clearly,
Yeah.
but I think it's one of those where like he wears his influences on his sleeve, but you never once feel like, "Oh, this is so familiar. I've heard this before." Oh no. Oh no.
Okay,
No.
so I was going to ask you that, Mike, because I suspect so it was the philosophy and the grimdark for me, but I was thinking for you, it definitely would be the Dune meets Lord of the Rings, and everyone's saying that that's what inspired Baker's world. And so at this point, having read the first three books, I know you're saying that it's not overwhelming and it's got those inspirations, but it's not dominating
No,
what Baker's doing.
I don't think
Uh,
so.
but did you see those connections? I was going to ask you, do you think Dune fans would enjoy
Oh
this
yeah, like
series?
you just read about like the Prophet Fane and all that stuff about like going to the desert blind and all that. It's like okay, yeah, I feel like but there's other things I feel like that Frank Herbert was inspired by the kind
Oh
of
yeah,
that. So it's one of those things where there's a way to say, hey, here's something I love without ripping it off. And I never once feel like, oh, this is just a rip off or oh yeah, I like this story the first time that I heard it. But you're saying like it's not overwhelming. I also think that like the first half of Darkness Comes Before, I was like, I don't know if my mind can handle this, and then boom, it just clicked, and then it was
yep,
like amazing after that.
yep.
So I kind of felt the same way about Dune. It was the third time I read Dune before, just like everything clicked for me, and it was just like the perfect book for me. So I think it's probably going to be one of those series that if you're reading it at the right time in your life, it's probably going to be a smash hit if it's something that you're into.
What about Lord of the Rings? Did you
I
see any
mean,
of those influences?
or just like some of like the naming mechanisms, really like the Dunyane and things like that, really made me think of the Dunedain, stuff like that. Just simple things
Yep.
like that, more like the naming mechanisms more than like the lore or anything like that. But
Yeah.
the locations and things like that, the travel just seems similar. And you know how Tolkien very much will describe a landscape to you for 30 pages, but
Yeah.
he'll take 3 sentences to describe this battle. I think Baker's kind of that same. Like I said today in the video, is like I'm not really reading his books for the battles. It's not his strong suit, I wouldn't say. But he also is not going to spend as much time on the battles as, a lot of epic fantasy authors are going to.
Right. Right. I mean, yeah. I don't know about Lord of the Rings, and I've read Lord of the Rings several times. I would say the aesthetics in this book are quite similar with the idea of a crusade or jihad always in the background of this story. You have the Fa'anim who are, I guess, reminiscent of this like Muslim culture, this like Islamic empire. The Nansur Empire has a kind of Byzantine feel, which Dune has. Um, I would say too that one of the things that reminded me of Dune is actually the Dune Yane. They are like in philosophy, they're like a combination between like the philosophy of Immanuel Kant and some kind of distorted, kind of perverted form of Madhyamaka Buddhism. But if we're doing Dune, yeah, it does feel like Baker's drawing on aspects of both the Bene Gesserit and Mentat abilities there with these, the powers that the Dunyan have, and kind of the Spacing Guild too, with the element of secrecy that the different sorcery schools have. Um,
I
remember
think I can
that
look at every
Paul,
one of these schools and say something about them reminds me of the Bene Gesserit or the
I
Spacing Guild,
I know
Yeah. So
that's
that
true.
definitely, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it's a eugenic blood cult sisterhood, and uh, Paul Atreides is like the ultimate pinnacle of their achievement. And if you think about the Dunyan, Kellis is similar to them. Like he's entering into trances. He wants to learn the thousandfold thought. He's trying to find the shortest path,
Yeah.
right? If you remember,
You could be many places at once. Yeah.
that's right. Kwisatz Haderach literally means shortening of the way.
Yeah.
Um, and so I do think there are a lot of similarities in the overall plot, right? The scion of like a lesser but noble, still noble house is developing these special skills, which includes predicting the behaviors of like everyone around him and like finding the shortest path and pulling all the right strings and destroying the enemies of civilization, the Harkonnens and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
It's very
Like,
much the story with Kellis feels very much like if Paul wanted to just control everybody. Like if he
that's
went into
right.
that not reluctant, he just was like, "Heh, watch what I do to these people." I think that's
Well
pretty much
said.
why I say I call him Dickhead Paul Trady. So he just kind of goes in there to be like, you know what? I'm smarter than all y'all. I'm gonna manipulate the hell out of you. And yeah, that's why you're so what did I say in the live stream? That's why it's so easy for him to honey dick people, I think, you
I
know.
love that word. I actually had to look the word up because I had no clue what that meant. Then I looked it up and I just started laughing because yeah, there's definitely that in there, right? He's enlisting specially trained warriors to destroy what he sees as the enemies of civilization and there's overlapping prophecies and secret teachings and all of this stuff. There's a drug in the book called, I don't know how to pronounce it, Shanv, right?
Right, yeah.
So
Whenever there's a word I didn't know, I just kind of glaze over it after a while. I'm like, yeah,
yeah,
okay, whatever.
my eyes just go crossed and I move on. All right, I was going to ask you about the characters. The overall, who was your favorite character or characters in the series if you had to pick? Um, and I can
It
add this
changed.
as an
It ch-
audience question from T. Baggins here. He wants to know what we think of Baker, also Baker's style of characterization when it comes to how his characters think. So, favorite characters, and then Baker as a writer of character.
well, I think it changed. It's like books one and two, Nair, Erskiotha. That's that kind of character, that archetype I love. I love a Conan the Barbarian type and smash punch first, ask questions never. You know, that's just kind of a character I just always had a passion for, thanks to Robert E. Howard. You know, they did that with Carson Orlong in Malazan as well. So I think it was that, but I think reflecting upon it after reading all three books, it's got to be a Camian. I think at this point, Drusus a Camian. I think his journey outside of the fact that it's like, I mean, look, I understand. I've had my heart broken before outside of his pining, you know, in the third book, I still think most of the times he's pretty much a gangster. And then you see at the end, this dude's a true OG, you know, pretty much is just like adios, amigo, you know, at the end there. You know, that's just kind of how he works with things. But I think he had the best overall arc, you know, going from like reluctant to I don't even say reluctance the right word, but he's kind of like, well, you know, I know this big secret. I'm gonna kind of keep it to myself and kind of see what happens, and kind of feels like he's kind of trying to play both ways, and then says, okay, I'm a believer, and then you see what that kind of gets, what kind of trouble that gets him into. But I definitely think he had like the mic drop moment in the series for me that made me like, okay, that's my guy right there. That's someone I would follow for sure through a series.
Yeah. Akamian was my favorite character too. Like he's the only character that I feel like I consistently liked. He's a flawed character, right? But he's also wise and he's kind of thoughtful and searching. I feel like in the he really does change. He's a what would you call it? A dynamic character when we meet him in book one. He's got this. It's almost the feel of one of those noir detective stories. He's this world weary wizard investigator. He's worn out and he's overweight and he's in love with a prostitute and
I
he
love that
wants her to
Baker
quit
likes
her
to remind
job.
me all the time that he's portly. He's
I
portly.
know, right?
I
And
was like,
it's that
I was like, at me.
that's part of it, right? He's he's like he's a very flawed character. Uh in the first book, his mentee is not going down the path he wants him to. His girlfriend will not stop being a prostitute. Which has got to be hard on a guy.
Pretty rough.
And he does not believe in the mission of his mandate school, of his employer, right? He has, all this stuff going on. And I really like the way that he changes and kind of develops over time, his love for Esmenet and his insecurity and his desperation, right? As she like falls under Kellis's sway, and so we get to see his, what would you call it? His human, all too humanness, as Nietzsche would
Right.
put.
And one of the human things that he does that I love is I feel like even with the mandate, you feel that they're real forceful. And it's like, okay, well, we've met, I mean, this is just through the first book. We've met two characters now that used to be under his tutelage, and he's just kind of like let them leave, and that you're not supposed to do that.
I
Clearly, when you leave
know.
the mandate, you're supposed to be what, Proyas, and I forget the
I forget the other guy's
yeah,
name.
and he's in book one. But it's
Yep.
just that humanized him to me to be like, okay, well, he's not just a slavish devotion to the mandate. Obviously, he's got like a human side of him to be like, he's very much the if you love someone, let them go kind of person. I think, except he
Except
tries to
for
do that
Esmenet.
several times with Desmond. Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, then that's his whole struggle in this book. And I know that there are some booktubers who think that this part of the book in Thousandfold Thought is really annoying. I don't feel that way. I won't give any spoilers at this point, but a
the pining.
companion in book three is dealing with a really human problem, which is that he's stuck between these two people, one of whom he loves and one
Mm.
of whom may be the Holy Messiah. And he wants to hate Esme, but he can't because he loves her. And he wants to hate Kellis, but Kellis is like the Messiah savior. He's almost a god. So imagine, like, not to be crude here, but if you're a Christian, for the Christians out there, imagine you're Jesus's tutor and you're becoming more and more like enamored and amazed by him every day, and you're convinced he's the one. Um, and that's kind of a weird, potentially offensive example. Imagine you're Morpheus.
I was curious to see where you were going with that one. Let's
Imagine
talk
you're
with that one after
Morpheus,
the
and
cameras go off.
I know, right? And you realize that Neo is the one, he's going to liberate humanity, and then he steals your wife. What are you going to do? Are you going to just leave and join your robot overlords? No, you're going to be like, well, shit, I can't compete with Keanu Reeves as he's like dodging bullets and like bending spoons and stuff like that. Like, what's a brother going to do, Mike?
Especially
Yeah, so that's kind of his
when you already
dilemma.
stole the other guy's girl too. It's like, dude, how many do you need? How many do you need? Yeah.
And I do like in the book three, I will say in book three, of all the complaints people have of him being kind of whiny and lovesick, I do like how he gradually becomes skeptical of Kellis, and he has really good reason to be skeptical of Kellis, given what I won't give spoilers here, but given some of the things that Kellis does.
I think about with Kellis's position when he comes back, when Akeman comes back in book number two. I'm being really vague here. He comes back towards the end of book number two, and I think that kind of, I don't know, because he's pissed off clearly about what's going on. This is really hard without spoilers.
I know.
And Kellis, let's just say Kellis isn't in the best position when he comes back there, and he's able to get his way out of him. I think that I don't know. Maybe that knocked him down a peg to be like, oh, well, see this. He's not infallible.
Right.
I don't know, but it's all part of the. I think if you look at it from a certain point of view, it was all manipulation, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Big time. All right. So let's rate the books. No pressure, but I just wanted to get a sense of almost how you would tier rank these books. Like, but let's do it out of 10 because it gives us more nuance. What grade are you giving these out of
Are
a
we doing
10?
decimal
Like,
points?
sure.
I mean, Dark Scopes of Four is incredible. It's like one of my favorite fantasy books I've ever read. So it's going to be in the upper 9.5, 9 3/4 kind of range for me. And that's only because I always say there's no such thing as a perfect book. And if people throw out 5 stars or 10 out of 10, way too much. And it's one of those I think that kind of legacy takes time for me. So, but I love it more as time goes by. So Dark Comes Before is actually what I think might actually bring down some of the things about the series for me because it just set the bar so damn high, and it was incredible. I hear about how many decades you spent like crafting that first book. It's clear. You can see that. It's about as perfect as a fantasy book, especially a book one as you can get for me. And I always seem to love book ones the best. Warrior Prophet is one of those I think that the further I get away from it, the more I like it. Like when I read it, I think it might have just been a little bit more of I just couldn't stop comparing it to Darkness That Comes Before. So I think that with book two, like I'd be sitting firmly about an 8. It definitely doesn't reach those highs of Darkness That Comes Before, but it's still better than most fantasy books that I read, clearly. And I'm of the generation where an 8 out of 10 is still really freaking good. It's really, I know anything below a 9 now apparently is a bad grade.
No grade inflation for your generation.
Um,
That's lovely given what I do for a living. I have parents emailing me for I give their kid like an 87. I had I'll tell you real quick. I had a parent and I gave the daughter an 87 on her essay and the parent says, emails me and says, "Can we talk on the phone?" I said, "Oh, this is weird. Like her daughter's doing fine,
right.
well in my class, and she got a
Which
B plus, maybe an A minus. Like it's weird that she wants to talk to me, but sure, I always say yes. Anyways, we talk after school, and she says hi, and her first words to me are, "I just want to understand the grade that you gave my daughter," I, and so I gave her my speech about how I'm mind boggled that a parent wouldn't be proud of their kid for like a B plus on a really hard like final unit assessment essay. And then she goes, her response was, I'm I graduated from Brown with a degree
oh
in theater.
wow. Oh wow.
And she goes, I'm just not used to a grade like that. And yeah, we get parents like that all the time who just, like it's
I'm
crazy.
married to a teacher, so I'm aware of these things. But yeah, it just it blow not to completely derail, but it just so much. I'm like, it's like my generation. It was like when you got that grade, your parents came to you and asked you what you was doing wrong.
Right,
My parents have been overjoyed with an 87, okay?
right,
But I'm just
right.
saying that like they never thought I'm gonna go to the teacher and find out what the problem is. You know, why are you giving him better grades? It
Oh,
was like
they do
why aren't you
that.
getting better grades? Not why aren't you giving him better grades? Yeah.
Yep. Kids misbehave in class.
Wow.
I'll email parents and say, there was misbehavior, just letting you know. We gave them a warning. Next time it'll be at attention, that kind of thing. And the parents will start coming at you. What did you do? What did you do? It's incredible.
Different generation for sure.
Well,
But now they've given me some time to kind of delay here. Thousandfold Thought, like if you'd have asked me the night I finished it, I'd have probably said like a 6 out of 10 because I
wow,
was so disappointed with some things,
wow.
and I'm sure we'll talk about it here. But I also said, give me a couple nights to sleep on, I'll probably feel a little differently. I'd sit on a solid 7 with it. It as a character first reader, I wanted better resolutions to some of these character arcs. But it's also one of those things I've been told maybe don't look at it as book 3 out of 3, look at it as book 3 out of 7, instead of looking at it just a trilogy. And I understand it's just a 7 book series in the end, but I don't know, just for a trilogy, I felt like I would get better resolutions to some of these because, like, I liked the Camians, didn't really care for what happened with Nader. I didn't care what happened with Conphus or care for what happened with Conphus. That's a character I felt like was completely just wasted after book 1. Zarias, the best parts of him happen off page, apparently. It just little things like that just drove me crazy. I felt like Esmenet after book 1 was just a completely wasted character. So it was just one of those things where it's like I was more upset about some of the character stuff than the actual story. And then for 3 books, you're teased about this meeting between Kellis and another character, and then when you get it, it's kind of like, huh, maybe I'm not smart enough, or maybe it just doesn't make any sense, or maybe it just isn't as important as I made it out in my head, I guess. I don't know. And that makes me keep going back to this thing where people are saying, when you look back on Thousandfold Thought after you finish Aspect Emperor, you're going to feel differently about it. So that's kind of where I'm at right now. That's why I say I couldn't give it higher than a 7 because, yeah, the disappointment was high, but there's so many things he does right. The world's still incredible. His writing's still great. I think that the Holy War had a decent enough resolution that I'm cool with it. It's just, again, book 1 set those expectations so high, I think. And I don't
Mhm.
think that I should just be like, well, you just got to lower the bar after that. I don't think so. I don't think so. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm curious what your numbers are here.
Yeah, I mean, I want to like touch on one thing that you said. I really don't like when people tell me like, "Oh, if you had problems with books 1, 2, and 3 or books 2 and 3 or book 3,
Wait till book 9. Yeah.
listen, man, exactly. Listen, all those three gigantic, monstrous books that each took you like 3 weeks, those are just the prequel to the really good thing that's coming. And like, that's just that's all build up to the thing that's coming that you got to wait for. And it's like I've found in the past when people tell me that when I get to the thing that they're telling me I'm supposed to be waiting for, then that thing is underwhelming. And then they tell me, no, listen, book 1, that's the build up to books 2 and 3. And then like book two, no, the ending is incredible. This is just getting us to the ending. And it's like, okay. So I will say for me, I gave book one a 9.5 out of 10. I'm like you. The story really popped. It had just the right amount of philosophy and big ideas, and the themes were so smoothly weaved into the story. I thought the world building was elegant, and the prose was, as you said, it was exquisite. The second book, I gave it an 8, if I remember correctly. But I honestly think after some reflection, I would bring that one down to a 7.5. I don't know. Aside from like Lord of the Rings, which does this much better, I'm not super into a book where for the whole story it's just one long, miserable, hot, sweaty trek. Not just a trek, but a trek cum fever dream cum love triangle. Again, I like a greater variety of settings, and I want a bit of court politics and castles and high romance stuff that George R. R. Martin can do.
Yeah.
I really
I'm not a
like this
fan of sitting around
trilogy.
campfires forever. I'm not a fan of
Yeah,
that. So yeah,
right,
I'm with
right.
you there.
So I like all the books, and I really like the trilogy overall. But I guess when I finish a Baker book, I always feel like I've just been dragged sort of through the mud. You know what I mean? Like in this last book, I'm giving it an 8.5
Okay.
out of 10, and we can get into why that is in a minute. But before we get to the spoiler portion, um, so I'm giving this an 8.5. So for me, it's going to go Darkness That Comes Before, Thousandfold Thought, mostly because I'm a philosophy guy, and the ideas in every chapter just really, really intrigued me, and it was an intellectual odyssey for me, this book. And I think book two kind of went light on the philosophy and the big ideas and the sort of mind blowing revelations and that sort of thing. But I wanted to pose another question from an audience question here. This is Eric McLuhan. He says Baker writes about many graphic things. However, I found his writing both beautiful and grotesque at the same time. He has an amazing ability to set tone and atmosphere in a scene, and I believe he could write horror even. He just gets into your head. Do you think he ever crosses the line into cringe? Um, he says personally a few times, especially with the multiple phallus descriptions. So I wanted to jump from our kind of our ratings into what do you think about that? Was as 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 good as the overall series, I think we agree is. Do you think Baker can be a little out of control? Do you think he ever goes over the top and gets kind of cringe?
I think that his styles when it comes to like the sexual stuff is very Joe Abercrombie like. It's like whereas the reader you're supposed to feel uncomfortable. Yeah, I'm never feeling uncomfortable because G- dude, quit writing sex scenes. You're so bad at this. You know, like a lot of male fantasy authors I talk about try this. I'm like, dude, stop. Stop that. Stop trying to describe what a period's like. No one respects you for this. It's never like that. I think like, when in the first book there's a character who's doing that, and then there's like black semen or something like I'm just like, I'm disgusted, yeah, but I'm never just like, oh, it's cringe because it's so poorly written. I think it's more of just like the whole situation, just like, I feel like I need to go take a shower. It's so filthy. So I think it's more in that Joe kind of way. Whereas I would never say Joe is a great erotic writer. I'm saying that his sex scenes are set up to make you feel uncomfortable. Because let's be honest, a lot of time sex can be uncomfortable. Would you want
Yeah,
anybody to watch you? Probably not. Would you want anybody to write about it? Probably not.
right.
So I think that it's kind of on par. I wouldn't never say it's cringe. I think he's too talented of a writer
Yeah.
really for it to be cringe. But I don't think he'd be writing romance novels. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I see as a literature person, as I got my master's in English education. I got a second bachelor's degree in English after my philosophy one. So I've read a lot of sort of the canon and like gritty realism and suburban fiction and stuff like that. There was a writer, I don't know if you've heard of him, called John Updike. I actually think, Mike, you would like John
I feel like I
Updike.
remember that name because it feels
He's
like there's a
got
lot
the
of jokes
Rabbit
there. Yeah.
tetralogy, like Rabbit Run and Rabbit is Rich and all that stuff. He did that. He would write sex scenes because he's like, let's write about what sex is really like. So there'd be sex scenes in John Updike novels where the character is reading like a consumer guide book while he's having sex with his wife, and she's like fiddling with this thing, trying to fix it, like with the drawer next to her bed and stuff like that. But they know they should probably have some kind of a sex life, and so it's just funny. And I do think you're right about that. I think that you can. I think there's all sorts of different ways that you can write sex, and um, I think Eric puts it well with the beautiful and the sacred on the one hand that Baker's able to pull off, and the grotesque and the profane on the other. And I think that's kind of the point. I'm not squeamish or prudish in any way, but I do think sometimes Baker crosses over into the cringe, with Nayor literally fucking a hole in the ground. You have vagina-faced creatures and the Inkoroi with pendulous, he calls them bruised phalluses, and the Inkoroi like womb ship and the womb plague, and like um uh just as you said, like this creature shooting black seed into Esmonet's peach, which
All right, I might need to revise my answer now. George bringing back some stuff here. Maybe I
now
just
you're remembering.
what I said that I like kind of glaze over some words I don't understand. Maybe just the disgusting stuff. I just start being like, all right.
You went into a Baker trance. I don't know, like fight scenes where Naor's dong is just flopping around, and like definitely the guy takes a lot of risks, and sometimes he knocks it out of the park, and sometimes he's killing off a main character while that character is banging his own mother. And okay, I'm gonna see. I shouldn't have given the spoiler there, but I'll put a spoiler alert before that in the video. But sometimes I'm covering my eyes, I'm covering my face in shame when I'm reading R. Scott Baker, and I just have to go take a cold shower after I'm
To
done.
answer your question, viewer, yes, he would write very good horror, though, I think. It would probably be very
Yeah,
thought-provoking. Let's put it that way.
yeah,
Elevated horror, I believe, is what they would call it. Yes.
yeah, yeah. Okay. Wow, it's hard to recover from that one. So one of our listeners here, Cayman Smith, says, "Will you continue with the Aspect Emperor books?" And then Eric McLuhan says, "It has been said that Prince of Nothing is just a long prologue for Aspect Emperor." Okay, we already talked about that one. So will you continue with the Aspect Emperor?
What I said today was it's one of those things where I feel like the further I get away from this, I'm gonna miss it more, because I love this world that he's created. The back history and the lore is just incredible to me. It's like some of the most addicting I've ever read. So I don't think I could ever stay away, but I would be lying if I said that my enthusiasm wasn't dampened a little bit by Thousandfold Thought. So, and the fact that it's one of those things where I look at it and I'm like, okay, well, each book's kind of taking a step down for me, each one. So is it heading on that? Is that a new direction, or is that just, kind of finishing up this, taking care of business, and now we're gonna get to the real story like people were telling me. So I'll definitely continue, but I'm not gonna sit here and say, oh yeah, I'm starting in February. Definitely not. I'm gonna take a break from it for a bit because mostly because I have plans already for other
Yeah,
things. But I mean, I own them all over there, and I'll definitely continue. But I wouldn't say I wouldn't put a date on it right now. But it's not going to be a Malazan situation where I just never go back to it. Apparently, I miss it more than I miss Malazan right now. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah. Um, I needed a palate cleanser after reading this. I remember the moment I finished, I said, I need to get as far away as I can. And again, I really enjoyed this, but I kind of am now connecting to what you've been saying over the years, which is like palate cleansers are really important. I literally sat down with my wife and we said, instead of watching TV tonight, I asked her this, would you be willing to read like Peter and the Starcatchers with me? Just something like fun and like, it's like Harry Potter or whatever. Like, let's read this out loud. It's wholesome. It's fun. It's
You and your wife
quirky.
read out loud to each other?
Yeah, we do.
That is the most adorable shit. I'm jealous. That's amazing. Oh my gosh. My wife thinks it's weird when I read out loud.
Well, at a certain point, what happened was when we were in college together, um, we she realized I hadn't read Harry Potter, and that was not a thing for me growing up. It was for her. So she wanted to relive the magic of that with me, And she said, would it be cool if we turned off the TV for a little while and just each night, instead of watching TV, if we just read Harry Potter? And we read all of the seven books
That's amazing.
that way out loud. And it took us probably 6 months because of our busy schedules and stuff like
Right.
that. But now that's a thing that we do. Like we read His Dark Materials, and now we're doing Peter and the Starcatchers. So yeah, we do that. Although
I definitely wouldn't read Baker out loud to each other. It probably
no,
wouldn't go very
no,
well.
no. Okay, so this one is from my buddy I Samwise. He writes, Prince of Nothing is often compared to Malazan. I know both of you have expressed frustrations with Malazan, but found that Prince of Nothing was more what you were able to do, what you were looking for. What does Baker do as a storyteller that you didn't find Erickson doing?
I, for me, I feel like I just with Erickson so much, great mind, and I love that Erickson just goes for it. He doesn't care if you're hanging. He doesn't hold your hand. I love that. What I think Baker does for me that clicks better is it's weird, but I'm always aware of what's happening on the page. I mean, there are a couple things like I did ask, hey, did what I think happened between Nair and Compass actually happen, or am I reading too much into it? Little things like that.
Yeah.
Still, you are aware of what is happening in the moment. Malazan, sometimes I'll be like, I don't know if this is a memory. I don't know if this is a vision. I don't know if this happened 23,000 years ago. I don't know if it's happening right now. I don't know if we're inside of a sword or somebody's veins. I don't know where we are right now. I don't know who is this talking right now. I have no idea who this guy is. I never do that with Prince of Nothing. I know who's talking. I understand what's going on. I understand where we are, when we are, and I'm cool with that. Maybe that's just the type of reader that I am. I like to be a little bit more grounded. I feel like this can kind of go out there, Clearly, I love Dude. It can go out there, and I'm cool with that. But I'm never just like asking, where the hell am I? When the hell am I? Who the hell am I right now? I never do that with a series. I do that a lot with Malazan. And again, I admire that he goes for that. And he doesn't say, I'm going to hold your hand with this. That's not my criticism. I'm just saying that's why this clicks for me a lot more than Malazan did. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, that is fair. And I'm like 100% with you, though. I was mostly going to leave this one to you because you've read several
Seven.
more
Yeah.
of the Malazan books than I have. I only read Gardens of the Moon, and
Oh, shit.
I had no clue what was going on half the
Oh, you
time.
have
And
no idea how far-fetched it gets then. Okay.
no, I don't. And that's kind of sad because there are these booktubers that I really like who are, kind of the smart, thoughtful booktubers, you and Joanna and Philip and Jimmy and the people who are reading, who are not afraid of a challenge when it comes to a book and who can explain their ideas and who are working at a high kind of intellectual level. And they're all reading Malazan and going, yeah, we're loving this. It's great. I'm listening to the audiobook and I'm listening to it on two. And I'm like, I I have I have no clue what's going
My
on.
brain
Who
just
are
don't
these
work that way.
characters?
Yeah.
What's that?
My brain just doesn't work that way. No.
No, mine doesn't either. And so, yeah, I read it with my eyes, and I often had no idea who the characters were, the many characters, what the hell was going on at any given time. How did these wards work? Is this real? Is this a dream?
You know what's
Um,
funny is like later on in the series, I think when I was still doing the read along, I think we got to like book 6 and people were like, "Oh, I'm so excited that now we really understand how wards work." And I'm like, "We do?"
we do.
I was like, "I guess I missed it." Yeah.
And, if you talk to someone like, Critical Dragon AP who
Warrens. Warrens,
edited
not wards. Sorry, Warrens.
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 I said
Yeah.
wards,
Someone's going to call
Warrens.
me out for that. So sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
No,
Warrens, not
it's
wards.
just they will tell you like, oh no, you just got to come at it with certain expectations and you got to read it closely. And I guess I just don't feel like I'm smart enough to do it. And what's funny is I was an English major, so and a philosophy major. I've read some really dense, difficult stuff. But
Yeah, I read Dante, I read Divine Comedy, and I
yeah,
and I can understand that, but sometimes Malazan just leaves me in the dust. And here's the thing: is it's just the type of reader I am. Is people will tell me, if you don't understand it, don't worry about it. I can't do that.
I can't do that
I
either.
can't do that. So it's definitely a me thing.
I can't move on until I am positive that I know what's going on. And
And I
like
don't
you,
mean in media res like be explained later. I don't mean like that. I mean like just literally don't know what's
right,
going on. People, it's okay. Erickson doesn't even know what's going on. No, 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 no. That doesn't
right,
work for me. That's why I've avoided Gene Wolfe because people
right.
are like, oh, it just it doesn't make any sense, and he doesn't care that it doesn't make any sense. I'm like, all right, that's not a very good sales pitch, you know.
Okay, I predict that you will. Have you read any of Gene Wolfe yet? Okay, I predict that you will love book one and that you will get increasingly frustrated with as the series goes on. Book one, you're gonna love it. It would be
Pretty
one of
sure
your
Christopher
favorite
told me the
books.
same thing. Yeah.
Oh, did he?
But
Okay.
Christopher also told me that he would like hold my hand through it if I
Oh
just
yeah, and he can. He's fully capable of that. And you can also watch our. I've done two discussions of.
yeah.
We did all four books on. I think it was on my channel, and yeah, he knows way more than I do about it, and he walked me through it. So that was how I was able to get through it. But I mean, there are different levels of dense. I've been recommending Alistair Reynolds to you for years, and I'm hoping that one day you will acquiesce. And his writing is famously dense. But the thing is, having read both Alistair Reynolds and Steven Erikson, I always know what's going on in an Alistair Reynolds novel. Always. As long as you take it slow and you pay attention to what you're reading, you will never be lost in an Alistair Reynolds novel. It is not like Steven Erikson. It's dense and there's a lot of like exposition, but it's worth it and you'll come away with a crystal clear grasp on what the story is. I cannot say the same for Erikson or Wolf, really. Although Wolf's doing something completely different. There's an underlying meaning with Wolf that it's confusing for a different reason than Erickson is. But with R. Scott Baker, I feel like he's less dense than both Erickson and Reynolds. But in terms of clarity, I think he's somewhere in between the two. Reynolds is always super clear. It's just dense, and you're going to have to take your time. With Baker, you don't always know what's going on, but you usually do. Is that fair?
I think so. I think so. I think there are a couple times I'm like, wait, I'm not sure quite I understood. Like there's a part where there's things you can tell is foreshadowing for something else. Like there's a character who's in a battle and he's pretty sure he sees like his own corpse in the ground, and I'm like, that's clearly something that's going to matter later. And I can roll with that. I can roll with that. That's fine. Whereas with Malazan, that would have went 9 layers deeper than what I just told you. And I've been
Yeah.
like, okay, what?
Yeah. Yeah. All right, last one on the overall trilogy, and this one is from Samwise, my buddy there. He says grimdark as a genre and Baker are specifically known for pushing the limits of what people will tolerate in their fantasy. And this is not the cringe question. He's asking, does he ever cross the line in terms of dark content? And why do you think he pushes it more so than many other dark fantasy authors? So, does he cross the line? Is he writing stuff that he shouldn't write? Not is it cringy, but like, is he going too far? Is he like outside of the Overton window or whatever?
I wouldn't say like goes too far because I mean I've read a lot of messed up stuff. I've researched a lot of history, and we've
Right.
got a lot of stuff with people going too far. Clearly with that. I think it's you get that fine line of the R word that people don't like clearly to read about that, and they wonder why authors are still writing that kind of stuff. And I'm always saying, when you're dealing with history, that was a huge part of history for thousands of years.
And still is.
It sucks. It does
Yeah.
suck. I'm not saying it doesn't, but I don't think an author writing about it means they're glorifying it or anything like that,
Right.
or rape culture or any of that stuff. I'm sorry I said the word. But it's just that stuff I understand. That's probably gonna be a little too far for me. What I was saying about that part with a certain someone with compass, I was like, oh, okay, that's yeah, that might be the point of no return here a little bit, and that's after you were fucking a hole in the ground, you know. I don't know. It really is just that stuff. I can definitely see that, but for me, again, I know these are just words on a page. I'm not. This isn't like a snuff film. I'm not. I'm not. This isn't something a recounting of something that actually happened. I always go in these days like this is fiction. I understand if you don't like it. No problems if you don't. I'm not sitting here saying, "Oh, this is great." I'm just saying that it doesn't bother me to the point to where I ever say, "Oh, that's too far." So when most people say, "Oh, I love grimdark," but I just was like, "That's too much." I'm usually like, give me more. But yeah, that one topic is obviously something that's it's going to make this series a very, very bitter pill for a lot of people to accept, much less swallow.
Yeah, I think that was very well said. On this point, I have like you're a nice guy. I have a little bit less tolerance with this with some of the criticism that Baker gets. It's a good question, Sam. But when you have grown men going online and like engaging in this pearl clutching about this scene or that, and I don't know, just joining in this performative, like faux sort of puritanism. Look, this is a very gritty book. You knew what you were getting into. I think a lot of this is selective outrage for political purposes. I just went to see a film, for example, last night called Nosferatu, and this film had some of the most insane, most disgusting, and over the top gore and violence and rape and monsters and eating children and ill treatment of women and subjugation of women and eating them while you're having sex with them and laughing off their trauma as female hysteria. And you know what? Because it stars Nicholas Hoult and Bill Skarsgård and Johnny Depp's daughter, and it's the hip movie of the moment, and it's all romantic and gothic, you hear none of the same complaints.
I'm
Like, I
saying this is
just,
the first I've even heard of half of this thing. So okay, yeah.
you haven't seen Nosferatu yet? Well, you would love it.
No, no, no. I know I would. I know I would. It's the content that you just
I
mentioned.
know.
All I've heard is it's a great movie.
Well, Mike,
That's all I've heard. Yeah.
I got home and the first thing I did was I'm like, wow, that was like really crazy. That was like over the top. But I really love the film. It was really good. And I'm like, I wonder what people are saying about it. I just read a New York Times review of this movie when I got home, and the guy writing it, the journalist, literally said that he was turned on by the gore and the monster. He literally said, "Take me, Nosferatu." That's a direct quote in a New York Times article, book review from a guy who wants Nosferatu to take him. There's no outrage over that because there's no, what would you call it, virtue as currency to be earned. Look, unfortunately, this book is just as blood-soaked as our own ancient past was. And you know what? I'm glad Baker doesn't whitewash any of that stuff. I also, by the way, on a lighter note, not a lighter note, I agree with Cormac McCarthy when he says that if it doesn't concern life or death, it's not interesting. But again, I think so much of this is selective. Sometimes I guess the violence in this is it sometimes cringe? I said it was before. Yeah, sometimes it's a bit gratuitous. But am I going to get triggered about it or write a dissertation about the male gaze or women's lack of agency? No, because this is a legitimate aspect of our shared past and of how human nature has played itself out over millennia. And so Baker is actually allowing us to discuss these issues like adults, and we are adults. And so I think, sorry for being on a soapbox here, but I've just been seeing so much like whining about R. Scott Baker, and I want people to stop acting like children and stop pretending to be outraged. Look, different strokes for different folks. If you don't like this kind of art, or you don't, if you want this kind of stuff to be softened, you can go read plenty of other authors. There's Brandon Sanderson, Terry Brooks, David Eddings. A lot of modern fantasy basically looks the other way on this stuff, or at least tones it down. So I like what Baker's doing, and I think he has every right to do it. And I think we need to be able to talk about the darker aspects of what is it Solzhenitsyn said, the line between good and evil runs through every human heart. We have to
Man, you
talk
got you
about
got a
that.
quote for everything, my man.
I know, but we do,
I love
anyways,
it.
I'm going to get in trouble.
No,
This will
no,
be
no, no. Listen, listen. With me, in these things is it's like when someone tells you this book has all the trigger warnings, and you read it anyway, and then you get upset. It's like it's not like you weren't warned. So clearly, you were just looking to get pissed off. So
right.
like, there's so much good literature out there. Read something that you sounds like it'll be for you instead of just
Like
something
Blood Meridian.
you just want to go. You just want to go into it being mad. But I didn't go into that being like, hey, I've heard this is really atrocious. And then I'm upset. It's like you go on Goodreads, you're like, why does every horror book have like a 3 star or lower rating? And you read all the reviews and they're like, oh, it was disgusting or it was freaky. Like, it's a fucking horror book. You know, what are you expecting? Rainbows and puppy dogs? I don't really understand. So everyone tells you that this book is visceral, it's messed up, and it's going to be stuff that is going to F you up if you aren't ready for it. And they still go into it and then get upset about it. That's what I don't get.
Right. Right.
There's so
And
many good books
again,
out there.
we
Don't go for ones that you
I'll
think will
end
be a
with
match
this.
for you.
Yes, exactly. And if you've made it to book three and you're still complaining about it, it's like, you knew what was going to happen in book three. But it's like I told you when we talked about George R. R. Martin. I find that the outrage is really selective. You'll read books where thousands and thousands, sometimes millions, are killed, and nobody says a word. Murder is the worst thing. You could make a hierarchy of the worst things that could possibly happen to a person, and murder's probably the worst because your consciousness is extinguished and you don't exist anymore. And then maybe rape under that, and right, you could like these are the worst things ever. They're horrible. No one should ever do them, and we shouldn't tolerate it in a civilized society. But why is it that when thousands and thousands and thousands are slaughtered in this book or in Game of Thrones or whatever, you don't see people with placards outside, justice for the Dothraki? They're not like but then there's this other thing that's really bad. Like if you insult a lady in your book versus if you murder like a million people, the outrage begins. It's like, hold on a second, what's going on?
Hmm.
So, all right, I'll stop there before everyone unsubscribes. Um,
Passionate, guys. You gotta love the passion.
I'm passionate. All right, so let's get into Thousandfold Thought, just with a few questions here, just specifically about
Sure.
Thousandfold Thought. What were your favorite moments in this particular book? Because that was one of Slay's questions. He wanted to know what were your favorite moments, and then we can move on to what maybe you didn't like about this book.
I know I like something. Oh my
Like what
gosh.
were the high points? What were the greatest hits, I guess, of this book? Like what were some of the scenes that you were like, wow, and you had to kind of
Are
put the
we
book
are we
down.
are we spoilery now or no?
Yeah, let's thank you for that reminder. Let's transition over into spoilers. The point isn't going to be spoilers, but this is the section where I'm not going to watch my mouth in terms of spoilers. So we're
I
we're going to
think
do.
then it's probably a Kamian doing his like Pokemon evolving and like becoming like a full on like warlock basically and being like a badass and show, whoa, okay, yeah, maybe I wasn't quite grasping exactly what the Gnosis is and what it can do. And this guy is a holy shit wizard now. He's a badass. So I think that
Yes.
moment was pretty freaking rad. It was kind of like the moment I had in book two where I was waiting for Nair to do something. Then when he does it, it was awesome. I kind of think I had that with a Kamian, but I expected it out of Nair. I didn't expect it out of a Kamian like this. So yeah, I think just that final evolution of him kind of like reaching his full power level. I assume it's his full power level. Who knows? Who knows? Possibly
Yeah,
higher.
Kamian is definitely a badass. Um, I don't know how you felt about this. I actually like that we got a better sense of the magic, a better sense of how like the gnosis works. I'm gonna do a video where I talk about kind of the philosophy behind the magic. Um, so that I really enjoyed that. Had to reread some of that stuff multiple times. I don't know why, but I really liked that scene with the old blind man and Kellis dismounting, and he goes over to talk to him and asks who he is, and the guy's like, I'm one who has something to whisper in your ear. And the guy's like, once I whisper this into your ear, you're going to kill me. And everyone's like, no, Kellis, don't go over to him. And Kellis goes over to him, and he does, in fact, chop the guy's head off. And I don't know why. I just like that scene. I like the mystery of it and that sort of thing. I'm trying to think of other moments. Was there anything else that you
Like I said,
enjoyed?
with me, it was just a lot more disappointments,
Oh,
like you mentioned with the way Zarias goes out, it's kind of like, huh. Because I felt like Zarias and his mother were like set up like so messed up in the first book, and I wouldn't know more. And then they were kind of like a cameo in the second book, and then this was like, really? So that was it, huh? So yeah, with me, it's like I feel like all I'll do is drag Thousandfold Thought if we get really nitty-gritty, because to me it was just a lot of a disappointment with where a lot of these characters besides the caveman kind of ended up. And with me with Kellis is just like I know you're not really supposed to like him, but I don't know. I feel like I'm almost to the point of like rooting against him,
yeah,
so to speak. So it's just like
yeah,
I don't know. I don't know. That's a very hard character for me to really get into because maybe it is that Muad'Dib kind of archetype I love that Messiah figure that you want to do the right thing and he's not doing the right thing
yeah.
so I feel like I kind of feel like I want to root for him because he is that Paul Atreides type, but then I'm also like yeah, but he's not a good person. Not that anybody here is really a good person. I'd say Kami is probably the closest to a good person. But I don't know. I don't know. With me, it's very hard for me with this series. That's probably my biggest struggle is getting on board with Kellis. I thought I was kind of on board with him in the first book, and with this one, and it might just be because that meeting with Moangus just let me down so damn much. Did you
I
feel that
hear
same way
that.
about that meeting?
No, I actually kind of I don't mean to be contrarian on purpose. I liked the
Oh, not at all.
meeting because, well, you're right, it was a letdown. So for me, it was brain candy and it was philosophical food for thought. But you are right. Story-wise, that meeting was a letdown. I was
Well, didn't you
enjoying
feel
it
like
for
it was whoever like met him first, and I felt like they told him all these same things that Moingus told him. I was like, so
you're right.
someone just came and spoiled your party. It just
Okay,
told
so
you
my
everything.
enjoyment of it was kind of masturbatory, like intellectually. I I highlighted so many quotes from that, and I'm making a video about it, and so I'm going to explain those quotes. And so again, that is the perspective I'm coming from. I liked a lot of the nuggets of wisdom and philosophy in there. But you're right. As a story qua story, that scene was, I think it stretched for like 2 chapters. It was kind of a letdown. You're right. I think you're right, Mike. And because I haven't read Aspect Emperor yet, I couldn't really tell you how this all resolves. But yes, I think we're supposed to be extremely distrustful of Kellis. I like the tension that was created as Akamian becomes disillusioned with Kellis. When Zynemis dies, that's a big thing that starts to create um, that distrust when Kellis is cold about his death and Akamian really gets bad vibes by that. And he really starts to see that Kellis is kind of like he's been unmasked and he realizes Kellis is not acting out of love. He's acting out of whatever is the shortest path. And so he does what he has to do to keep the illusion going. He takes the shortest path, which in the moment he acts like he's above it all, like he's on this omniscient God. And Akamian is kind of like, wait a minute, that's not how like a messiah or a prophet would act, right? And um, I don't know if you remember later when Naor says, "Ask yourself, sorcerer, what do you have that he has not taken yet?" Right? And that's kind of true. And he starts to realize slowly that this guy is not all that he seems. He does some horrible shit too, like the way he manipulates people, the way he uses Esmanet essentially as a rent-a-womb, as his
Yeah,
own like
Vessel. Yeah.
eugenic fountainhead. And again, when you're trying to achieve the shortest path doesn't always equal the most moral path. There are times when, for example, Kellis and his army are storming into a place, and like Kellis makes sure that that city slaughters like a quarter of their own citizens, 23,000 people dead
Yeah.
just because they didn't want to open their gates and because they were afraid. And he'll give these speeches about how human beings are literally our war and that we can be boiled down to our violent tendencies and that's our inheritance and our holy imperative. And is there truth to what Kellis is saying? Yes. But he's also committing the naturalistic fallacy, which is when the naturalistic fallacy is when you say that something is morally right because it's natural, therefore it's right. So war has always existed, therefore war is good, because that's just what we do. And so I just don't think that he recognizes he's taking the shortest path. He's going to say whatever he has to say to get to win essentially, and he's willing to sacrifice Serway, and he's willing to send Naor off to get killed. And anyways, you are right to be suspicious of Kellis. I don't think we're supposed to like him at this point.
Yeah, it really felt like I was reading a prequel series about the villain. I mean,
Yeah.
clearly that's what it feels like. And I mean, that's okay. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that's kind of a struggle for me is that type of character being the central figure of this trilogy it gets kind of tough because I'm just not used to. I've never read anything else like that. And that's a good thing. It's a good thing. Don't get the criticism wrong there. That's just saying it can be a little bit of a struggle for me
Yes.
because
Okay.
I'm
Now
not
that
used
you've
to
opened that
following a
gate,
character like that. So when people are always like, "Oh, they're morally gray characters," yeah, but then there's like more gray than that, more black than white, I guess you'd say, more dark than light, and that's
that's
definitely
right.
what Kellis is. Yeah,
That's right. And I kind of agree with like Thomas Hobbes. What was it? The whole war between the ideologies of Hobbes and Rousseau. Hobbes believed human beings are fallen, they're sinful, they're terrible. In a state of nature, human beings, they kill each other, they're rapacious, they're licentious, they're terrible, and it's society that keeps human beings in check. Rousseau believed he believed the opposite. Humans are naturally good. We're peaceful. He had the concept of the noble savage. When you leave humans in a state of nature, they're cooperative and they share and they're wonderful.
Society that makes them
It's
evil.
society, man, that corrupts them. It's capitalism. It's living together in these modern arrangements, which are unnatural. And it's society that corrupts them. But human beings are like naturally wonderful. And like, I kind of agree more with Hobbes. We kind of suck. And most of the research shows that like you need to watch people. Like if you read studies of like you can do these studies where you watch people at the gym, and if there's no one else around, they don't wipe the machines. But if there are people around, they wipe the machines, right? When people are in the bathroom, if there's someone else in the bathroom, they wash their hands. If there isn't, they don't. So I'm distrustful of certain aspects of human nature, but where's the lightness? Where's the optimism? Where's we also have good qualities. We're capable of amazing things as human beings, and I feel like that is completely absent in Baker's world, I guess.
I couldn't said it better, but yeah.
All right, what else didn't you like? Because I don't I haven't mentioned that many of.
I think that just the trilogy as a whole, I thought Esmondette was great in book one, and she's pretty much just a simp for books two and three, and that kind of bummed me out because I think it's just one of those things like I went into it already hearing, went into the series like beginning hearing like, oh, I don't like the way he writes women. Okay, I mean that's normal. I hear that quite a bit with some epic fantasy, especially Grimdark. So I was kind of expecting. And then in book one, I thought she was a really badass character. I really liked her, but the second that the old worm tongue slithers into her ear, she's just there just to please Kellis, or just to be an object to be pined over by a Camion, and that really let me down because I thought that she had a really great start. And it's like when you have a really good rookie season, you're never the same again after that. So it kind of felt like for me.
Yeah, I
Like you
I
said, she was
agree.
just there to be a vessel by the end.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. She's like hollowed out. I think one of the main flaws with this book actually has to do with the first two books,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
because I feel like it wasn't balanced enough. I felt Baker was having to throw so much lore and backstory and world building into this last book because of kind of bad planning in the first two, and that ended up being overwhelming. Like you said, in books one and two, we know very little about the Inkoroi and who they are and where they come from. We don't really have a sense of how the skin spies operate or what they look like, even. We know very little about Akamian's background, although we learn about it in book three. We know nothing about the what do you call it? The Kuno and Koroi wars or the Consul or the non-men. And Baker has to throw all of that stuff into this book. And I think if I correct me if I'm wrong, this is the shortest book of the three, right? And he has to kind of just awkwardly dump all that stuff into this book with the no God and all of that stuff.
I do
Uh
feel like I got through it quicker than the other two. So,
yeah. But so that was definitely like kind of a problem that I had with it. It felt a little bit unbalanced. Was there anything else that you struggled with in this one that was
again, I think it's really for just like how well everyone was set up in book one. And if they didn't follow that up, like Confus, I was completely enamored with Confus in book one. And it didn't feel like he ever really went, oh, hey, I'm emperor now. Like, what? Okay. Oh, you're just dead now. Great.
that
All
was
right.
weird.
I mean, I
That
know
was
that's how
weird.
war works. I get it. And that's what people tell me. Oh, you don't get to do your whole story sometimes. Your war, you just. I get that. I'm saying it was a very disappointing arc. I
Yeah.
felt like it set up so much for that character to do literally nothing with him.
Yeah, that's true. Although his beheading was very satisfying in a lot of ways. I guess I would just round it out by saying I think Baker is great at writing scenes. He's great at writing, like, not battle, but fight scenes, court drama scenes, smoky back room negotiation scenes, Machiavellian, like council meeting scenes, revelations, conversations, all that stuff. Deep inner reflection, he's very good at that. But I'm not so sure that he's good at gluing all of those together and making a seamlessly complete, flowing, interweaved, like hyperlinked novel. Not in the way that someone like George R. R. Martin can do. There's a hazy imprecision, there's a sloppiness about the plot. It's muddy and overly complicated at times. Did you ever feel that?
I mean, I don't want to say he can't stick the landing or something because I feel like that's a really rude thing to say. I just think that maybe myself is the way that I like my character arcs to go. I just don't feel like I feel like so many were set up for great things, and it felt like he changed his mind. I'm never going to say it felt like it was a different author, but it felt like he changed his mind between books one and then two and three. He felt like, I'm going to do something completely different here.
Yeah.
So, but I guess you say muddy is a good way to a good descriptor. I think, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I'm with you too, with what you said about Kellis. I was beginning to find him a bit annoying as a character, quite honestly. The
Like you
fact that
can't root
he,
for him, but when it starts to feel like it's turned to where you're rooting against him, it's a really tough character to be the lead of the series.
yeah, and that might be the point. And I don't want to call him a Gary Stu or whatever, because the whole point is that he is like the chosen one, the prophet, the Messiah. You go back in history and you wonder what it must have been like to be a disciple of Christ or whatever and watch these miracles. Okay, that's what Baker is doing, and he's setting it in a fantasy realm. But the fact that he's like Jesus and Buddha and Neo, but also a little bit like Aldous Snow from Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Like if Aldous Snow also had Asperger's and spoke only in like Zen koans, like he was annoying me by the end of the book, and I I guess okay, I was cringing.
But the like Halo hands thing, I'm like, what the fuck? Okay, yeah. I don't think
So
it cringing. I don't know. Maybe I just think cringe means something that everybody else means. But yeah, I was finding him to the point to where I was like, I don't want to say unlikable because I don't ever think he was really likable. I don't know. It's so hard for me to really explain how I feel about this character, and I guess it's a good thing because yeah, I feel like Baker's the type of writer he probably does want you to be conflicted.
he's nuanced,
But
yeah,
I think it's just one of those things. It's just I've never read another series where the characters are like that. I've read so many morally gray, like you said, it's so overdone at this point. And I've read ones where they're not morally gray; they're just terrible. I've read
yeah,
that too. This is just somewhere in that weird gray space between those, and I don't know. It's Kellis is a tough one to figure, and I guess I've got four more books to figure out. Well,
yeah.
maybe more.
All right, let's end with this one. You got time for one more?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. I was gonna have you drop a quote.
Oh, I didn't write any
Choose
down. I don't know.
choose a quote, drop a quote. That's okay. Let's do an audience question. Let me see this one.
I know
Um,
Slay's got one in there, right?
is Baker uh this question is asking if Baker is Cormac McCarthy if Cormac McCarthy attempted to write Lord of the Rings.
Well, I mean, he uses punctuation, so I don't know about that.
I could start with this one. I don't think so. I think that Baker lacks important qualities that both Tolkien and McCarthy have. That's not a knock against Baker at all.
Sure.
I'm just saying these are very different writers. Tolkien gives us the Shire and he gives us a world that is worth saving. You
Yeah.
know what the stakes are and you know why the journey is important and you know why life matters and what goodness is and
And
truth
allies and
and
friendship.
allies
Yeah.
and friendship and
Yeah.
virtue,
Yeah.
a world worth saving. And so the journey makes sense. Um, I don't see that in the second apocalypse so far. And I would say with McCarthy, he lacks the he again, Baker's a great writer, so this is not like I'm shitting on him or something,
Sure.
but he lacks the restraint and the sense of diction and artistry that McCarthy has. I think people are only saying it's Cormac McCarthy meets Lord of the Rings because McCarthy writes Blood Meridian, and Blood Meridian is brutal, and
Yeah.
Cormac McCarthy's novels are.
I was
Uh,
gonna say I'm probably the wrong person. I've read three McCarthy books, and the Road, Blood Meridian, and All the Pretty Horses. And I don't get Lord of the Rings out of any of those.
yeah,
So maybe I'm the wrong guy to ask. I haven't read enough McCarthy yet to actually give a full answer on that one. Whereas I know that's one of your favorite authors, correct? So
yeah, but I've only read I think four Cormac McCarthy novels. It's just of the four that I've read, I was blown away by
yeah.
them. Um, and I've read the ones that you've read, and I've also read No Country. Um, Cormac McCarthy's writing, the brutality for McCarthy is always necessary. It's never gratuitous or
Not shock
performative.
value. Yeah.
Yeah. McCarthy isn't a provocateur or a contrarian, I think, in the same way that Baker is. And so I don't like that comparison, really. Baker has his own strengths, and he's a good writer in his
And
own
plus,
way.
Blood Meridian didn't work for me, so I'm a pariah, so.
Oh no, I get that. That's fair enough. That's another one that's not going to be for everyone. But why don't we wrap it up here? I want to respect your time, and I want to get this out to the public. And so, yeah, I hope you keep reading this series, and um, I, I hope you enjoyed it at least overall, at least with the three combined, and
Of course.
stuff like that. And
Can I
thanks for
give a
coming on.
special thank you to our friend Slay? He was very much the handholder that I needed. The series is encouraging. He never made me feel stupid because I couldn't understand the difference between a Phantom and a Kasharin and all that kind of stuff. He really put it in. He actually sent me notes like to help me out and stuff when I first started,
Oh
and I
wow,
appreciate that because it didn't feel overwhelming because he was so awesome about it. And he's like thanking me just for giving the series a try. I'm like, thank you, because I'll be honest, this is a series I'm never going to forget. I'll tell you
yeah,
that much for sure, because nothing else feels like this, like at all.
that's right.
So definitely best special thanks to Slay, and of course, to you for asking me to come on and talk about this, and,
Absolutely. Thanks for
and not
coming on.
blasting me for thinking this book was just the thousandfold disappointments. That's kind of how I felt about
No,
it.
I share a lot of your concerns and stuff like that. So, all right, guys, thanks for tuning in. By the way, I just hit 3,000 subscribers. Thank you to all of you for that. I really appreciate it. I still don't know why anyone would want to listen to as you can see from the last hour and a half, my insane, um, disjointed ramblings. But I am going to do a live stream to say thank you, and I'll just go on for I don't know, 2.5 hours and just answer whatever questions anyone who
When is
shows
that?
up.
When's that happening?
What's that?
When's that going to happen?
That's going to be probably in like 2 weeks, maybe like 2 Saturdays from now, because I'm going to be in Florida next weekend. So I'm going to have Christopher Rocchio on for that, DJ Butler, and I was going to ask a few guests, people like Mike, to just stop in for like 5 minutes,
Oh yeah,
whatever.
say drop me a reminder. I'll definitely stop in.
Yeah, and just like say hi. I was gonna have like Samwise stop in and a couple of other booktubers. So look out for that. And thanks again, Mike, and bye everyone.
Later.